Section 15.3 Flatworms, Nematodes, and Arthropods. By the end of this section, you will be able to describe the structure and systems of flatworms, describe the structural organization of nematodes, and compare the internal systems and the appendage specialization of arthropods. The animal phyla of this and subsequent modules are triploblastic and have an embryonic mesoderm sandwiched between the ectoderm and endoderm. These phyla are also bilaterally symmetrical, meaning that a longitudinal section will divide them into right and left sides that are mirror images of each other. Associated with bilateralism is the beginning of cephalization, the evolution of a concentration of nervous tissues and sensory organs in the head of the organism, which is where the organism first encounters its environment. The flatworms are acoelomate organisms that include free-living and parasitic forms. The nematodes, or roundworms, possess a pseudocoelom and consist of both free-living and parasitic forms. Finally, the arthropods, one of the most successful taxonomic groups on the planet, are coelomate organisms with a hard exoskeleton and jointed appendages. The nematodes and the arthropods belong to a clade with a common ancestor called Ecdysozoa. The name comes from the word ecdysis, which refers to the periodic shedding or molting of the exoskeleton. The ecdysozoan phyla have a hard cuticle covering their bodies that must be periodically shed and replaced for them to increase in size. Flatworms. The relationships among flatworms, or phylum Platyhelminthes, is being revised, and the description here will follow the traditional groupings. Most flatworms are parasitic, including important parasites of humans. Flatworms have 3 embryonic germ layers that give rise to surfaces covering tissues, internal tissues, and the lining of the digestive system. The epidermal tissue is a single layer of cells or a layer of fused cells covering a layer of circular muscle above a layer of longitudinal muscle. The mesodermal tissues include support cells and secretory cells that secrete mucus and other materials to the surface. The flatworms are acoelomate, so their bodies contain no cavities or spaces between the outer surface and the inner digestive tract. Physiological processes of flatworms. Free-living species of flatworms are predators or scavengers, whereas parasitic forms feed from the tissues of their hosts. Most flatworms have an incomplete digestive system with an opening, the mouth, that is also used to expel digestive system wastes. Some species also have an anal opening. The gut may be a simple sac or highly branched. Digestion is extracellular, with enzymes secreted into the space by cells lining the tract, and digested materials taken into the same cells by phagocytosis. One group, the cestodes, does not have a digestive system because their parasitic lifestyle and the environment in which they live, suspended within the digestive cavity of their host, allows them to absorb nutrients directly across their body wall. Flatworms have an excretory system with a network of tubules throughout the body that open to the environment and nearby flame cells, whose cilia beat to direct waste fluids concentrated in the tubules out of the body. The system is responsible for regulation of dissolved salts and excretion of nitrogenous wastes. The nervous system consists of a pair of nerve cords running the length of the body, with connections between them, and a large ganglion, or concentration of nerve cells at the anterior end of the worm. Here, there may also be a concentration of photosensory and chemosensory cells. Figure 15.15. This planarian is a free-living flatworm that has an incomplete digestive system, an excretory system with a network of tubules throughout the body, and a nervous system made up of nerve cords running the length of the body with a concentration of nerves and photosensory and chemosensory cells at the anterior end. Since there is no circulatory or respiratory system, gas and nutrient exchange is dependent on diffusion and intercellular junctions. This necessarily limits the thickness of the body in these organisms, constraining them to be flat worms. Most flatworms species are monoecious, hermaphroditic, possessing both sets of sex organs. And fertilization is typically internal. Asexual reproduction is common in some groups in which an entire organism can be regenerated from just a part of itself. Diversity of flatworms. Flatworms are traditionally divided into 4 classes: Turbellaria, Monogenea, Trematoda, and Cestoda. The turbellarians include many free-living marine species, although some species live in freshwater or moist terrestrial environments. The simple planarians found in freshwater ponds and aquaria are examples. The epidermal layer of the underside of turbellarians is ciliated, and this helps them move. Some turbellarians are capable of remarkable feats of regeneration, in which they may regrow the body even from a small fragment. Figure 15.16 shows examples of the phylum Platyhelminthes. The monogeneans are external parasites, mostly of fish, with life cycles consisting of a free-swimming larva that attaches to a fish to begin transformation to the parasitic adult form. They have only one host during their life, typically of just one species. The worms may produce enzymes that digest the host tissues or graze on surface mucus and skin particles. Most monogeneans are hermaphroditic, but the sperm develop first, and it is typical for them to mate between individuals and not to self-fertilize. The trematodes, or flukes, are internal parasites of mollusks and many other groups, including humans. Trematodes have complex life cycles that involve a primary host in which sexual reproduction occurs and one or more secondary hosts in which asexual reproduction occurs. The primary host is almost always a mollusk. Trematodes are responsible for serious human diseases, including schistosomiasis, caused by a blood fluke, schistosoma. The disease infects an estimated 200 million people in the tropics and leads to organ damage and chronic symptoms, including fatigue. Infection occurs when a human enters the water and a larva, released from the primary snail host, locates and penetrates the skin. The parasite infects various organs in the body and feeds on red blood cells before reproducing. Many of the eggs are released in feces and find their way into a waterway where they are able to reinfect the primary snail host. The cestodes, or tapeworms, are also internal parasites, mainly of vertebrates. Tapeworms live in the intestinal tract of the primary host and remain fixed using a sucker on the anterior end, or scolex, of the tapeworm body. The remaining body of the tapeworm is made up of a long series of units called proglottids, each of which may contain an excretory system with flame cells, but will contain reproductive structures, both male and female. Tapeworms do not have a digestive system. They absorb nutrients from the food matter passing them in the host's intestine. Proglottids are produced at the scolex and are pushed to the end of the tapeworm as new proglottids form, at which point they are mature and all structures except fertilized eggs have degenerated. Most reproduction occurs by cross-fertilization. The proglottid detaches and is released in the feces of the host. The fertilized eggs are eaten by an intermediate host. The juvenile worms emerge and infect the intermediate host, taking up residence, usually in muscle tissue. When the muscle tissue is eaten by the primary host, the cycle is completed. There are several tapeworm parasites of humans that are acquired by eating uncooked or poorly cooked pork, beef, and fish. Nematodes. The phylum Nematoda, or roundworms, includes more than 28,000 species, with an estimated 16,000 parasitic species. The name Nematoda is derived from the Greek word nemos, which means thread. Nematodes are present in all habitats and are extremely common, although they are usually not visible. Figure 15.17 shows a scanning electron micrograph in A and a representation of the anatomy in B of a nematode. Most nematodes look similar to each other, slender tubes tapered at each end. Nematodes are pseudocoelomates and have a complex digestive system with a distinct mouth and anus. The nematode body is encased in a cuticle, a flexible but tough exoskeleton, or external skeleton, which offers protection and support. The cuticle contains a carbohydrate protein polymer called chitin. The cuticle also lines the pharynx and rectum. Although the exoskeleton provides protection, it restricts growth and therefore must be continually shed and replaced as the animal increases in size. A nematode's mouth opens at the anterior end with 3 or 6 lips, and in some species, teeth in the form of cuticular extensions. There may also be a sharp stylet that can protrude from the mouth to stab prey or pierce plant or animal cells. The mouth leads to a muscular pharynx and intestine, leading to the rectum and anal opening at the posterior end. Physiological processes of nematodes. In nematodes, the excretory system is not specialized. Nitrogenous wastes are removed by diffusion. In marine nematodes, regulation of water and salt is achieved by special glands that remove unwanted ions while maintaining internal body fluid concentrations. Most nematodes have 4 nerve cords that run along the length of the body on the top, bottom, and sides. The nerve cords fuse in a ring around the pharynx to form a head ganglion or brain of the worm, as well as at the posterior end to form the tail ganglion. Beneath the epidermis lies a layer of longitudinal muscles that permits only side-to-side, wave-like undulation of the body. Nematodes employ a diversity of sexual reproductive strategies depending on the species. They may be monoecious, dioecious, separate sexes, or may reproduce asexually by parthenogenesis. C. elegans is nearly unique among animals in having both self-fertilizing hermaphrodites and a male sex that can mate with the hermaphrodite. Arthropoda. The name Arthropoda means jointed legs, which aptly describes each of the enormous number of species belonging to this phylum. Arthropoda dominate the animal kingdom with an estimated 85% of known species, with many still undiscovered or undescribed. The principal characteristics of all the animals in this phylum are functional segmentation of the body and the presence of jointed appendages. As a member of Ecdysozoa, arthropods also have an exoskeleton made principally of chitin. Arthropoda is the largest phylum in the animal world in terms of number of species, and insects form the single largest group within this phylum. Arthropods are true coelomate animals and exhibit protostomic development. Figure 1518 shows a trilobite fossil. Physiological processes of arthropods. A unique feature of arthropods is the presence of a segmented head with fusion of certain sets of segments to give rise to functional segments. Fused segments may form a head, thorax, and abdomen, or a cephalothorax and abdomen, or a head and trunk. The coelom takes the form of a hemocoel, or blood cavity. The open circulatory system, in which blood bathes the internal organs rather than circulating in vessels, is regulated by a 2-chambered heart. Respiratory systems vary depending on the group of arthropod. Insects and myriapods use a series of tubes, trachea, that branch throughout the body, open to the outside through openings called spiracles, and perform gas exchange directly between the cells and the air in the trachea. Aquatic crustaceans use gills. Arachnids employ book lungs. and aquatic chelicerates use book gills. The book lungs of arachnids are internal stacks of alternating air pockets and hemocoel tissue shaped like the pages of a book. The book gills of crustaceans are external structures similar to book lungs with stacks of leaf-like structures that exchange gases with the surrounding water. Figure 15.19. The book lungs of arachnids, A, are made up of alternating air pockets and hemocoel tissue shaped like a stack of books. B shows the book gills of crustaceans. They're similar to book lungs, but are external so that gas exchange can occur with the surrounding water. Arthropod diversity. Phylum Arthropoda includes animals that have been successful in colonizing terrestrial, aquatic, and aerial habitats. The phylum is further classified into 5 subphyla: the trilobites, the insects and relatives, the millipedes, centipedes, and relatives, the crabs, lobsters, crayfish, isopods, barnacles, and some zooplankton, and the horseshoe crabs, arachnids, scorpions, and daddy longlegs. Trilobites are an extinct group of arthropods found from the Cambrian period, 540 to 490 million years ago, until they became extinct in the Permian, 300 to 251 million years ago. They are probably most closely related to the Chelicerata. The 17,000 described species have been identified from fossils. The hexapoda have 6 legs, 3 pairs, as their name suggests. Hexapod segments are fused into a head, thorax, and abdomen. The thorax bears the wings and 3 pairs of legs. The insects we encounter on a daily basis, such as ants, cockroaches, butterflies, and bees, are examples of hexapoda. Figure 15.20. In this basic anatomy of a hexapod, note that insects have a developed digestive system in yellow, a respiratory system in blue, a circulatory system in red, and a nervous system in purple. Subphylum Myriapoda includes arthropods with many legs that may vary in number from 10 to 750. This subphylum includes 13,000 species. The most commonly found examples are millipedes and centipedes. All myriapods are terrestrial animals and prefer a humid environment. Figure 15.21 shows examples of myriapods. Crustaceans, such as shrimp, lobsters, crabs, and crayfish, are the dominant aquatic arthropods. A few crustaceans are terrestrial species like the pillbugs or sow-bugs. The number of described crustacean species stands at about 47,000. Although the basic body plan in crustaceans is similar to the hexapoda, head, thorax, and abdomen, the head and thorax may be fused in some species to form a cephalothorax, which is covered by a plate called the carapace. The exoskeleton of many species is also infused with calcium carbonate, which makes it even stronger than in other arthropods. Crustaceans may have an open circulatory system in which blood is pumped into the hemocoel by the dorsal heart. Most crustaceans typically have separate sexes, but some, like barnacles, may be hermaphroditic. Serial hermaphroditism, in which the gonad can switch from producing sperm to ova, is also found in some crustacean species. Larval stages are seen in the early development of many crustaceans. Most crustaceans are carnivorous, but detritivores and filter feeders are also common. Figure 15.22. The crayfish is an example of a crustacean. It has a carapace around the cephalothorax and the heart in the dorsal thorax area. Subphylum Chelicerata includes animals such as spiders, scorpions, horseshoe crabs, and sea spiders. This subphylum is predominantly terrestrial, although some marine species also exist. An estimated 103,000 described species are included in subphylum Chelicerata. The body of chelicerates may be divided into two parts, and a distinct head is not always discernible. The phylum derives its name from the first pair of appendages, the chelicerae, which are specialized mouth parts. The chelicerae are mostly used for feeding, but in spiders they are typically modified to inject venom into their prey. As in other members of Arthropoda, chelicerates also utilize an open circulatory system, with a tube-like heart that pumps blood into the large hemocoel that bathes the internal organs. Aquatic chelicerates utilize gill respiration, whereas terrestrial species use either trachea or book lungs for gaseous exchange. Figure 15.23 shows a member of the Chelicerata, the scorpion.